All right. Our next speaker has really taken off like a rocket over the last couple of years, and it's easy to see why. Not only does he have one of the greatest beards in the ancient history community, he makes some pretty good content too, proving it's possible to be more than a pretty face. So, whether you watch him on his YouTube channel or you follow him on X, you've seen him swatting down the BS of academia. He is the king of debunking and dedunking. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Dan Richards.
Can you guys hear me okay? All right, well, first of all, I really want to thank everybody for being here. This is really a dream come true for me, being allowed to research this kind of stuff and talk to everybody. And it's still a weird thing for me, so bear with me. This is only my third time speaking in public, so since high school. But as you can see on the screen here, thank you, thanks. But you can see, like, we're going to start off the talk about elongated skulls, and those of you who know who Brian Forrester is, which I'll assume is everybody in the room, have seen this picture before and have heard the discussion about these. And one of the things that I find most interesting about this is these are the ones from Paracas, which is the most famous area down in Peru, and we don't really know anything about the Paracas culture. The people that practice this cranial modification, some of it may well have been natural, but with the stuff that we know was people doing it to their children, we don't have any real touchstones to their culture. But in the Pacific Northwest, we actually do have quite a bit of a touchstone to the culture that elongated skulls. And one thing that's interesting is normally when you go around the world and you see these sort of things, you see, ruins. This is in Paracas, Peru right there. And with the elongated skulls comes these giant ruins, quite frequently impressive megaliths. But when you went to the Pacific Northwest, all the way back in the time of Lewis and Clark, they met this native here. His name was Concomly. And most of the art doesn't portray it, but he had a pronounced elongated skull. And that is a skull there. We'll discuss more as to great pictures of it in detail, but we do have a lot of science, quote unquote, surrounding his skull. And the culture that did this, the Chinook people, they were right in the path of the channeled scablands. I mean, they were down here in Portland, near Portland, and that's right in the path of the floods of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. For those of you who, know who some of these other guys are, like Randall Carlson, I assume a couple of you out there might know who he is, but he likes to talk about these floods quite a bit. Well, these people lived right in the path of these floods. And the people on the west side of the Cascade Mountains, all elongated their skulls. And this is something that not many people are aware of, but this was so ubiquitous that to the Native Americans on the west side of the Cascades, they were all known as flatheads. But the natives on the east side, they all called those guys flatheads because every single native on the west side of the Cascades practiced cranial modification on their children. And they did this all the way up into the 1800s. When we first made contact with these people, as Europeans, we saw massive amounts of cranial modification. And the first time that we really had a lot of it spoken of was during the Louisiana Purchase, when Thomas Jefferson went and bought a bunch of land from Napoleon, because Napoleon wanted to set the history and the setting for Sharp's rifles. He wanted to see a bunch of people get shot at, and he needed a lot of money to do that, and Thomas Jefferson helped him out. And we sent Lewis and Clark up there to learn a little bit about what we had up in that area. And they went right past Louisiana and right up into the Oregon Territory. And when they got up there, they noticed that the closer they got to the coast, the more they saw natives with elongated skulls. And the way that they did it was well documented. It was not a natural thing. It was something they were definitely doing to their children. And it's actually funny, when you read about the reports, they said that the children looked like a mouse caught in a trap because its eyes bulged out of its head. So it's the kind of thing where you wonder why a parent would start to do these things to begin with, if it was emulating something or someone that was causing them to disfigure their children. And we have quite a bit of images that were drawn at this time of people that were basically practicing this sort of thing. Lewis and Clark discussed it in detail. And one of the things that they said was that you could expect a slave to not have an elongated skull. And this is an important thing to note. On the west side of the Cascades, all of these natives had elongated skulls except for the people that were low-born or for some reason were considered cursed by the gods, like if they were trying to do it and for some reason they had to remove them from the cradle and stop. Because they started this right when the baby was born and they stopped it after about a year. And again, this was all up and down the Cascades. It also, funnily enough, the women in this area, they bound their feet. Not the same as China, but very similar. They bound their legs in order to make their calves more pronounced, and it was a very strange little similarity that we see across both sides of the Pacific. And what's very interesting here is the chief Concomly. Here is the only image that you'll actually see of him in a drawing that's got a real elongated skull. And this is a modern picture. This is from some artist on Instagram. And if you look at statues, though, here's a statue of his daughter. And if you look at the side of her, they definitely have her head is elongated, which it's kind of interesting. When you go and visit the area, you'll find that there's not nearly as many references to this as you would think. I know a lot of people in the area that are into the same stuff that we are, and they're not aware that this was one of the things that we could see a lot of in the area. The reason that they did it, they told us why, because it made them better. It made them harder and better and faster and stronger. They were, they were better because of these elongated skulls. And this is interesting because it really harkens to phrenology. It's not the same as phrenology, mind you. Now, phrenology gets, clearly like an image like this is pretty racist, but the idea of the way that they shaped their head, put them in touch with the gods or made them better, was very similar. And this is nowhere is this better pointed out than in this book here, which is from the Smithsonian Institution. It's long out of print now. It's from 1960, but it's the study of that chief Concomly. It's the study of his skull. And there's these images of it there. And as you can see, it's got the sagittal suture missing, and it's got the point where the spine meets at the same kind of thing that Brian Forster would talk about as being a natural thing, or excuse me, a man-made thing. And there's another skull that's in this book as well, an unknown chief they call it, but interestingly enough, the phrenologists were the ones that did all the work on these, because to the phrenologists, this was a real problem. They've got an idea in their head that the shapes and bumps on a human skull dictates personality and intelligence, and then you've got a group of people that are over here modifying their skulls. This is a playground for that hypothesis, right? So all of a sudden, these skulls became worth big money. And when I say big money, I mean they were looted by the thousands. And when I say by the thousands, it's ridiculous, but nowhere is that better told than with this another image of Concomly. You notice again, his head is not elongated there, although the artistic representations of him and his people were. Now, when he died from malaria, they believe, 3 years after he died, his skull was looted. And he was buried like most of the Chinook people were. They buried them in these raised canoes. They would put their bodies up off of the ground. They would put them on an island so that no big game could get to them, no big predators. And they would let them slowly rot and slowly decompose, and eventually there would be skeletons with grave goods left there. But Concomly, he was the number one, like it was the holy grail of elongated skulls. This was a known, well-known Native American. When Lewis and Clark returned from their voyage, or from their trip, Concomly was almost as popular as Sacagawea in the Western mind. He was a very well-known Native American for a time. And so his skull was looted, and sadly enough, you can see that they went and tattooed their name on the back of it, cataloged it, and put it on a shelf. And what's really sad about this is he was a huge friend to the white man, basically. When the first settlers came through, the first explorers came through, he traded with them, and he was well known for being shrewd but polite and understanding. When they built the fort near their Fort Astoria, he wanted to, many of his people wanted to attack it. And he famously said, look, man, these guys have really fine woven cloth. They have really powerful weapons. They have really good stuff, and they're not bringing their women and children. Do you really want to mess with these guys and see what happens when they bring their families? They're going to destroy us. And this was pretty salient observation 100 years ahead of its time. But he was a friend to him, and then 3 years later, it didn't really matter. They chopped his head off, and this was one example of many. This is one of the Memaloose Islands. Memaloose is the Chinook word for death or for burial. Excuse me, I need a drink. And there's a lot of those islands, like I said, where they would bury the people on them because they were considered sacred. Now, most of them were considered as having been touched by the gods of old, and they would choose certain islands. This is a great picture here that will show you just how bad it got. That is the grave of a white guy in the back, but here in the foreground is hundreds of bodies of natives that were dug up to be sold. The skull was really where the money comes from, and this was just all over the place. It was something they were proud of. And one of the areas that was most well known for this was a place called Coffin Rock, or Mount Coffin. And when Lewis and Clark saw the place, they said that there were over 3,000 of those canoe burials on there. And now keep in mind that the only people that were buried like that were free people. And again, if you were a free native on that side of the hills, your head was modified. That's 3,000 elongated skulls that were on top of this thing when they were first seen. And Mount Coffin, it's gone now. That's where it used to be. There's a Weyerhaeuser mill there. It's a logging area. It's long gone. They razed it. They actually destroyed it. But it used to be a very prominent and very well-known place, again with thousands of these burials on them. And this was a spot that was targeted, if you know who Lieutenant Charles Wilkes is. He did the expedition back in the 1838, and he went down into Hawaii. He went all over the world, as a matter of fact. Some people believe that he was the inspiration for Captain Ahab from Moby Dick. He was so well known as just being an asshole, basically, just a bad guy. But he did a lot of things that were weird. And one of the things that he did was when he was in Hawaii, he went up this mountain here, Paualahua mountain. I'm sure that I pronounced that perfect. But the natives had a way up this hill. They already had a planned trail that they'd been using for a very long time. And when he showed up there, he's like, no, we're not using that. I've got my own way up. And it turned into a nightmare. It got him in all kinds of trouble. It cost some of his men a few of their fingers and stuff because I guess it was cold in Hawaii that year on the mountain anyway. But the point is, he took it upon himself quite frequently to do things that were just a little avant-garde. And when he got to Mount Coffin a few months later, he showed up to the place, and there were still thousands of those burials there, thousands of them. But when he left the place, his campfire accidentally set the place on fire and burnt every one of the burials. And the natives at the time weren't in a position to do anything because the plague, the malaria that had come through, had wiped out, anthropologists estimate as many as 95%. Now, when he left there, there's no more mention of those skulls ever again. His father, to get a little conspiratorial, his father was a high-ranking member in the Skull and Bones Society and the British Parliament. He was a fairly well-known Freemason, and all the documentation after he leaves never shows any of the burials. And there was, again, this was a sacred area to the natives, and it ended up being very popular with the settlers. But it became a place that was basically almost symbolized the destruction of the culture that did these elongated skulls, the culture, the Cowlitz people, the Chinook-speaking people of the area. And now that's the picture I showed you earlier. You can see the little grave marker here. Now this is a really interesting image because for those of you who've watched my YouTube stuff, you know I'm kind of skeptical when it comes to things like ancient high technology or giants or anything. I want to get there. I'm not opposed to the idea, but you have to take me there. We're not just going to jump there. But this is an interesting picture because, well, this guy's, he's holding an elongated skull, but down in the center of this photograph there is this black skull. It's a little hard to make out here, but if I blow it up too much, it gets grainy. It's about 1.5 times size of the skull of all the other skulls in this image. And this isn't one of the images that you find that were doctored, that came from giants.com or whatever. This is in the University of Oregon's archives. And this is the only image that I've seen that hasn't been, with the pedigree of it, doesn't come from people that want giants to be alive or been real. It's quite the opposite. So I find it interesting, but where is that skull now? It's gone. Like all the other skulls that were on this island, which they say were up to as many as 10,000 at one point, they're just disappeared over time. Now, this place obviously was looted heavily, very heavily. People were out, it was an outing. You just take your wife and kids out there and go grab some skulls, right? Have a good time. And the thing is these things disappeared, and this isn't the first time we've seen that. If you've seen my video on the Paracas skulls, we've seen a very, very similar issue with this, where there are hundreds of these grave bundles. The Paracas skulls came in these bags, these grave bundles, and guys would go in and record. Hey, I opened 68 of those bundles, and I recorded what I found in 4 of them, and I put the rest back on the shelf. And then some of them are missing skulls later, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happened here. It's Rockefeller financed some of the Paracas skulls. Anyway, I've talked about that all in my video. I don't want to rehash that stuff too much, but the bottom line is it got to the point where it wasn't just some scientific inquiry and scientific interest that was funding this. It got to the point where it started to seem, not even seem, it became secretive. It became a bit on the conspiratorial side. And it had a lot to do with the stealing of spirit mojo, it seems, the stealing of your spiritual mojo, right? If you are, the native people believed that certain areas, for example, the man that was buried on that island, you might think that marked encroachment, but he was actually a big friend of the Indians and got their permission to be buried on that island. And he said that he trusted them more than white people and yada yada. But the bottom line is that he believed being buried there was part and parcel of him being allowed into their afterlife. If he wasn't buried there, he couldn't have it. And so this was a big deal because they kept burying their people in specific locations. Like I said, the name was Memaloose. And it's really interesting is you can go right here to Wikipedia, and there's a list of Chinook jargon places, and there's a bunch of Memaloose. Memaloose Island in particular are the places that you're looking for. And if you start looking for those Memaloose Islands, you're going to have a real hard time finding any information about them. Some of them are underwater now. Most of them are underwater now. This one right here is privately owned. They know for a fact that it is a native burial site, but the owners, anytime they do any work on the island, they don't release any information because they know the second they do that they're going to take it away from them. So there's all these different places in the area that you can't touch that the Native Americans used to bury people on, and the majority of them, it's not on the tribe's hand. The tribes have one of them. All the rest of them are either underwater or in private hands. And that's not quite as interesting as the stuff that you talk about with the Paracas skulls. Again, usually you see like megalithic structures and stuff, and so far I've shown you this little rock of basalt. But we have rumors there. There's these myths of a thing called the Bridge of the Gods, and this is the current Bridge of the Gods that crosses the Columbia River today. And this bridge in myth was said to have been built by the gods to facilitate people crossing from one side of the Columbia to the other and been destroyed. Lewis and Clark said when they showed up, they saw signs of the river having been dammed up heavily about 200 years before they got there. Now, the natives described this bridge as having a mystical fire in the center that was guarded by a beautiful woman. Some of the myths call it the first fire. They also describe it as having a really long, dark tunnel. Now, geologists believe that it is just a rock slide. They think that the sides of the hills just caved in and created a little bridge over the water, and then a few centuries later, that collapsed into the river. But as you see, the tunnel that they end up making doesn't really coincide, and the native accounts are very clear. That this was a scary tunnel. It was dangerous. It scared the braves, and you didn't take your families through there. It was dark and long. And all the artistic representations, they fail to account for that. And this place again, well, it was right in the middle of the Younger Dryas, that whole flooding that came through there, the entire channeled scablands that got tore up. The people that were said to have came after the Bridge of the Gods were said to have been the modern tribes. They had a myth that was really interesting when you consider the floods of the area. There was this beaver, and he was in the rivers, and he was slamming his tail, and he was causing these big floods to come across the land and head out to the sea. And finally, he slammed his tail really hard, and it just busted a hole right through the through the Cascade Mountains, created the Columbia River, and carried him out to the ocean. He kept thrashing around and started eating fish. So then the coyote god went down there and kicked his ass and carved him up, and that's where all the different tribes came from. The tribes were cut from the beaver's body. So it's interesting when you think about it from the perspective of the Younger Dryas and of the flooding. It's some of those smaller floods like mainstream science says, but then one big one like Randall Carlson says, and then the native account in the aftermath, you have the modern tribes. But that still doesn't explain why we have this long bridge, or we have a long tunnel under the bridge. To me, that sounds like a maintenance tunnel. It sounds like a service tunnel. It sounds like the kind of thing you would have alongside in order to take care of infrastructure. It's honestly something would be very interesting to go put my fingers and see the wreckage of this, but again, it's far underwater nowadays. And it's interesting because we see a lot of these similarities, there's a lot of touchstones between this and between Egypt and between Japan. And the boat burial. We see these boat burials that are prevalent in those three places. And then you also have the elongated skulls. I've talked about that again in the past. But that brings me to Longview. And Longview, Washington is, I don't know if any of you have ever been up in that area, but it's a planned city. That's not debated. The guy R.A. Long was a timber baron, and he was a prominent Freemason, and this was in the 1920s, in like all of the heyday of the, Madame Blavatsky and all of the modern resurgence of the psychic stuff, 100 years ago. And he was very bitten by the bug. His name was Robert Long, but he likes to go by R.A. Raw Long. And he had a problem because they were harvesting timber like crazy up in that area, and they had about 1/10 of the labor that they needed. So he used his own money and built a city that he modeled on Washington, D.C. And actually, if you look closely, you'll see that it's kind of laid out like a pyramid. It gets all very deep into some goofy Freemason stuff, which is outside of, I'm not as much into their symbolism as some other people are, but what is interesting is he wanted Mount Coffin, which is right there on Longview. He wanted it badly, but he couldn't get it. That's it on the bottom right. As it's being mined, the Portland Star and Sand Company came to it and started mining it for gravel. And any of you who have been on one of Randall Carlson's tours will laugh at this. It's basalt. And so if you go through that region, basalt is literally falling off of the hills around you. You could just, anywhere you walk, you'll trip over basalt. And they're like, oh, we got to mine this piece of basalt away for gravel. And it was offered to be bought by the Daughters of the American Revolution. R.A. Long tried to buy it with his lumber company. And they didn't sell it until after they had mined it down to almost nothing. That's it on the top left there was just a little spire. And normally I'm slow to listen to the rumors of people that are locals in these small towns and stuff, but these guys are very clear that this was partially modified by Native Americans, that this area was not just, that wasn't just a hill. Some believe that there was a passage inside of it, tunnels that may have actually gone into the inland itself. What we do know is the company that mined it for gravel, they stopped at some point, said that there was nothing left worth taking, but R.A. Long was still able to get and incorporate this place into his land. When those 4 streets that make the pyramid, those were all paved with the gravel that came from that mountain. And it was very clear that this had to be a thing that happened. And one thing that's really interesting about this, if you notice, if you see the little pyramid layout here, this was decades before Robert Bauval spoke of the pyramids pointing at stars. But if you look at the 2 lines there, and that points up to this little dot, the city of Longview seems to know that the pyramid pointed at a star or at something. And again, R.A. Long, he was happy to incorporate Freemason symbolism in his stuff. This is right in the middle of that pyramid in downtown Longview. It's something that a lot of the locals don't like to talk about, but there was talk of tunnels under the city. The city was built basically with the intention of keeping the working man a worker and the rich person rich. And so they made these tunnels under the town supposedly to pipe money from one end to the other. And all of this stuff was goofy, black magic-y kind of. Again, I'm not really into that stuff too much, but I don't have to be into it to accept that somebody else is into it, right? You don't have to believe that drinking baby blood or whatever is going to make you immortal to understand that if somebody believes that, they're going to do some goofy stuff, right? So R.A. Long definitely had some weird beliefs, and he wanted to steal the mojo, like I said, and he effectively did. And you know, he may have got this information from a number of sources. One of them may well have been, again, he was a Freemason, and you know, Lewis and Clark were Freemasons. If you take some of the other tales of like Templars in America, for example, or Christopher Columbus discovering America using maps that he found in, you know, the Library of Alexandria, or that sourced from the Library of Alexandria, I should say. I mean, there's a lot of ways that alternate historians could potentially piece this together, but what it ends up seeming to me is it's like we have the fact that it comes from the coast, and the further we get inland, the less we see of it. It very much seems like this was something that was adopted by people from the coast, maybe from Easter Island or from some other part of the world. And it does get a little weird, a little conspiratorial, but we have other places like Mount Tumtum, which I'm not a big proponent of those kinds of things, but a lot of people do think that some of these mountains might be pyramids, and this is one, if you're into that stuff, you'll definitely see this almost every single time. And it's incorporated into a number of those theories. And I was able to go up in the area and put my boots on the ground because I do live close enough to be able to go there without it being too hard on my personal life. And going through the area is really interesting because you can't go to where Mount Coffin even was. It's like there's the Weyerhaeuser companies just got that completely marked off. The place where the Cascades were, where the bridge collapsed, you can't go see that. That island that's out in the center, if you go try to swim out to that with scuba gear on or take a kayak out there, they're going to arrest you. They've locked down all of these places. Mount Tumtum recently was released, and the people that own it now will let people go up there and hike. But there's other things that are even more interesting. Like this picture here. This was found in the basement of the oldest department store basically in Longview. And the family that owned that place, the guy had built like a bug out bunker down there like for the end of the world. And when he passed away, the guy that was cleaning the place up found this with its back turned up against the wall. And the people that live in the area are very clear that this is part of that section of the water right there, except for that it incorporates this weird castle that shouldn't be there. But the locals that look at it are like, yeah, we know what part of the river this is. And if you look at what part of the river that is, there's this little spot there that there's not a castle there now, and I don't think it was probably a castle to begin with. Painting was done there in the 40s or 50s, and it seems to me more like the passing along of an old memory. Grandpa told me that there was this old temple there, and my history all comes from Europe, and so I paint a castle, but we can go there, and still, as of now, hopefully my video on this and these presentations don't ruin that for us just before we get to go there, but you can go and check this out, and I'm planning on making a trip there to put my boots on the ground, because the thing is, there is definitely something that was up there that was hidden. It's not for certain how deep it goes, how high the technology is or what, but again, you see the elongated skulls and you always see something else with them. It's not just the cranial modification. And there's whispers of it. There's all these different little sites, and the cranial modification, again, you go anywhere else in the world and you find one of these skulls and you talk to the people, they didn't have any touchstone to these people anymore. But that Chief Concomly, he's got a list of ancestors on the internet. You can go find and speak to his great-great-grandkids. And this was done, they elongated their skulls quite a bit. But now this is Mount Coffin, and I want to spend a minute showing you guys these slides because this is a very nice image of it, and it's pretty high definition. And you can see the basalt formation. You could see, again, the boats were long gone off of here, but you could see what looks potentially to even be a little cave, a little opening in the side of it. And you can see how, you could see how similar it is to Gunung Padang if you really think about it. It possibly is a partially modified structure, or possibly was. We have no way to really know now except for to dig deeper into local lore and local history. But when they stole that rock, like I said, they paved the city streets in it. They didn't just pave it; they used geometry. It was very big on the sacred geometry side of things, or some Freemasonic geometry. This is the only place in the world that I'm aware of where they did this sort of thing. Normally, when you have a street, they just pave it into squares, and in this area, they paved it in hexagons and pentagons. And R.A. Long, he set himself up facing east. His statue was set facing east. It was set in a specific part of the pyramid outline. It's a very spellcrafty kind of thing, and the people that own the town now, that run the town now, they've busted that all up. They've got him facing in the wrong direction now. They've moved his statue. They've replaced parts of the street with square panels instead of the other style of panels. And again, this place was modeled like DC, and then modeled all kinds of weird stuff, as I've tried to explain as best as I can here. And the thing is, when you go through the area and you talk to the people and stuff, it is something that a lot of them are well aware of and very proud of, the heritage. For those of you who know what the 13th rose or whatever means, he's being handed the 13th rose by a little girl. From what I understand, it's like a symbol of sacrifice or of knowledge. And then there's so much more. This is a memaloose. This is not marked on any history sites. I walked around that mound in the middle. That's about 25 meters across. I walked around a circle about it. It's about 3 feet high. I could have dug for clams and walked out of there with God knows what. But and there's several of these. There's a number of these up in that area that are completely unknown, that aren't haven't been not dug into, that are, you dig around and you find that they were labeled that, and then you've looked in to see why, and then you run into a dead end. When I was doing the research, Google quite frequently would try to push me other directions, would say, no, you don't mean these people with the elongated skulls. No, you don't mean a memaloose over here. You mean over there. I'm hard-pressed to call that a conspiracy, but it did feel very much like the lack of knowledge really pushed a certain direction and made these searches very difficult for me to suss one way from the other. But at any rate, I seem to have gone a little faster than I planned on. Don't forget to like and subscribe. But But at any rate, I was very impressed with the area. I'll get a little off script here. I was very impressed with it because I have people bring things to me all the time that are interesting. And this was close enough that I was able to go look at it. And when you look at things and you see that this is labeled a native burial ground, the local tribe's not calling it that, but the local tribe members 100 years ago called it that. And there's you just walk up to the damn thing. Stuff is weird there. If you go to a rest area in that neck of the woods, there's always these paintings about history and these little history blurbs. And when it shows Concomly speaking to Lewis and Clark, it always shows some Gunsmoke Indian. He's got the big headdress, but that's not who he was at all. He had a big misshapen head, and it hasn't been completely hidden, but it's quieted down to the point where I can safely say that the majority of you in this room didn't know that the Pacific Northwest had more elongated skulls than Peru. But I can say that because I've been doing experiments and asking people. But the thing is it seems to me like it was just not completely squelched, but just kind of pushed under wraps. And the kind of thing that we find a lot, usually inspired or usually integrated with the secret society kind of stuff. Anyway, I actually can take questions on this if anybody, yes?
Why do you think it's been squashed down or buried?
I think honestly because when the skulls come part and parcel with things like the mountain, the megalithic structures and whatnot, and I think that the majority of those were destroyed or raised, or like we saw with Mount Coffin. Even in the 1920s, if you went to the government and said, "Hey, we've got this native burial ground over there," they didn't let you just go hog wild with it. So I think a lot of it was just by the time they got over that far, I mean, in the 1920s, the guy's still able to break ground on a planned city right on the river. It's still kind of cowboy days over there. Probably just like with the island today, where I was saying that the guys do stuff and never report it. I think they just erased a lot of it and hid it that way. I'm sorry? Not at all that I'm aware of. Yes, sir.
Why do you think they were elongating their stuff? What people are they trying to imitate?
There would be a few different ones. Obviously, like the most fun one would be aliens. It's quite possible that it's just another species of hominid. It could even be, I mean, it only takes one Einstein to split an atom, right? It could be one person that was born with a weird shaped head that was just freaking smart and became worshipped by people afterwards. It does get tough to say, but in my opinion, there definitely had to have been a reason for them to have been doing this. Would you bug your kid's eyes out of their skull, there's got to be a reason you're doing that, right? Anyone? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Is there any suggestion that doing that to a skull, especially at a young age, would have any effect on brain activity, the pineal gland? Have any doctors or scientists look to speculate on how the brain might develop differently, and would that have led to any insights or anything that would be held in esteem?
Oh, that's a good question. They're unfortunately or fortunately, we're not able to do a lot of tests on that because of human rights or something, they say. I mean, in all honesty, I think we should just like pick one person. We could clone them even, and we could figure out foot binding at the same time and see what that does, and just mitigate the human rights violations, cut them in half. But at any rate, no, sadly, we really don't. It's one of the things that makes these such an interesting mystery, because if it was simple to do it, we could just, spend 10 generations and modify some skulls and see which ones were easy to emulate and which ones weren't, and then you could sift that way. Which brings up something really quick before I take the next question. The fact of the matter is something I didn't hammer enough away at in the presentation. The fact of the matter is, when the skulls are being sold on the open market, the best ones are gone first. So, like the Concomly skull, that one eventually got repatriated, and for some reason the Chinook people won't tell us where it is now, but they've got it, and they ain't gonna get it stolen again. But any of them that were actually really crazy good, those are gone. Those, like when Rockefeller got the skulls from Paracas, Peru, there ain't no way in hell he took the crap ones. He got the ones that were and those are not necessarily easy to view. So in my opinion, the fact that so many of them, tens of thousands of them, at least 10,000, are missing, means that the ones that are coming back are not going to be the best of the bunch. All right, yes?
What purpose would someone have for buying this school? Just because it's rare, or for these other kind of purposes?
Well, they were a scientific novelty in the early days because phrenology, the beginning of phrenology corresponded very heavily with about the time they were discovering them. And like I was saying, it's really interesting to the phrenologists, so they were buying the crap out of those skulls. But it ended up being just something that's interesting. I mean, people got some weird morbid things in their heads, and some people, They are cool, right? I mean, they do look cool, but personally, I'd rather have a replica on my shelf than the real McCoy. Hard to sleep at night, but
Dan, we have one over here.
yes.
How did they actually manipulate the skull?
There was a few different ways. This is another good question. One of the ways was, and you see this the most in the pictures of the Native Americans up in that area, they used two boards, and they would one was a soft board in the front, and they would just kind of compress it. Another one that they did a lot was they would put it in this full cradle, and they would have cords with a piece of bark, and they would squish the head that way. They left them in this, except for to clean them, for the entire first year of their life, sometimes even longer. And it was the kind of thing that when you think about how did these different, how do these different kind of things start, it makes circumcision pale in comparison. It's like, good God, having to look at your kid's eyeballs bug out for a whole year straight, it's like, holy shit, how do you sleep at night?
Dan,
Yes.
in your research into this, did you come across any documented pictures of ones that are anomalous and don't look like they were a result of head work?
Not in the area. The only skull that I found that was really anomalous in the pictures was that one that I showed you that's oversized. But again, it's an unfortunate reality, but by the 1840s, the looting was so hot and heavy that it was in the 1880s that Memaloose Island, they stopped the looting there, and it was basically done by that point. And they stopped that by spearing a dude to the island. Yes?
You point people out, let us know so we can, the mic.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hear it on the screen.
Dan, we have one back here.
Yeah, we got one in the back.
Oh, you in the back? Okay.
Dan,
Yes.
you've pretty studiously stuck to parsing data rather than pushing your own conclusions and agenda. But I'm going to ask you what might be an unwelcome question. At this point in your career, as you've looked over all of these different things and all of the research that's been done, both on the academic side and on the alternative side, what conclusions have you drawn, or where are you leaning?
Well, make me hang my hat. Well, I definitely think there was definitely a civilization or more to it. In my opinion, I think the world was smarter before Atlantis, during the Atlantis times, before the Younger Dryas, than mainstream history gives it credit for. I think that they're really slow to accept. Easter Island's a great example. They'll say, for the longest time, like, oh yeah, of course man could find Easter Island, but then how could the Polynesians go from there to find the Americas? It's like they found a freaking speck, and now you ask how they could find it. What the hell's wrong with you guys? It's just as far away. It doesn't even make any sense. And then nowadays, science bears it out and shows that they did know where both were. And so I think that the ancients were right when they had a reason that they honored the people from before. I think that I'm still slow to get too terribly high into the technology. I don't think they were as advanced as we are today, but I think that the direction that they went was different. Like Graham likes to say a lot. I think honestly, it would have been a lot of things that probably more basic. One of the things I like to mention a lot is when it comes to stone, I don't think that if we watched the pyramids get built, we would be like, oh my God. I think we would be more like, really? That's how they did it? These guys, stone was the premier material for like millions of years, right? Long before humans were humans, there were monkeys before us using stone. So one ancestor teaches their kid who teaches their kid who teaches their kid, and millions of years of that, and then we lose all of that when in a few decades or a few generations of people using metal. And ask yourself how much you know compared to your great-grandpa about horseback riding. How about your great-great-great-grandpa? It's like the knowledge gets lost quick. So I think that if we were to go back in time, I think that the mainstream historian would have egg all over their face, and I think that a lot of the stuff that we would see them doing would be pretty interesting. The one thing that I'm really the most interested to see, the one that really has me, is the longitude. I really want to know how they nailed longitude, because there's just too many places they got it. And you just imagine these gigantic wooden clocks or some shit. It's just, I don't know.
The farther back we go through humanity's collective idolatry, the more we see elongated skulls. Additionally, when we look at the ancient deities around the world, we typically see elongated skulls. How does that possibly relate to the possibility that they're mimicking what they were saying.
Well, I think even like on the most fundamental level, even the most rudimentary connection, it seems like there was some reason for people doing it. It does seem to have come more in the old world and emanated out into the ocean, into the Pacific. But honestly, I think that just showing the connection between the cultures and stuff. The fact is, the Egyptians thought it made you smarter. The Chinese thought it made you smarter. From what we can tell, they say they believe that the people, they were always reserved for the nobles. It was always reserved for the higher born. It wasn't. So there's something ubiquitous about it. You know, I mean, if you asked me, if I was to choose between marking which one would sound like a punishment, having you have to watch your kid walk around with their heads all tied up. That sounds like something you'd make the slaves do, not the free people, but that's not how it worked, right? So to me, clearly there's some sort of connection, but again, I think the world was traversed a lot more often than they think it was back in the day.
Last question.
I had a question about when you were talking about longitude. Are you talking about their understanding of the longitude of the Earth in terms of like the way that they use the meter to lay out so many things like the pyramids and some of the formations that you see in some of the other ancient sites?
Oh, I think what the really ones that get me is there's certain places like on the Peru map, if you measure between Africa and South America, the longitude there gets so exacting that it's the kind of thing you wouldn't see by chance. So I think that certain people definitely had an idea of it being round, and then you're going to map it out in that way.
How's it going? Having a good time?
Yeah, having a great time. How
That
about
was
you, Gary?
great talk. I love you going down the rabbit hole of elongated
Oh,
skulls.
thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
I knew nothing about. I knew there were some in the Americas. I know they had found like scattered ones. Even there was talks of Catalina. Never shown any proof, but there was talks of it. So, what brought you to this?
Well, my friend Sean Mooney, actually, he's the guy that brought me this, and he's way down further in the rabbit hole than I am, and he's into a lot of the stuff that I'm not. But when he started talking to me about it, and I remembered seeing at a museum when I was a kid the Chinook with the cradle board on the kid's head, and so then when we started digging into it, I was really amazed because numerous people that are in the community that live in the Pacific Northwest had no idea. And it's like, well, I wasn't really aware of it, and other people weren't aware of it, and it's like, what's going on here? And then the more you start digging into it, it was just like, well, there's more to it than just skulls. Just like everywhere else, it's like the skulls are part of this bigger, weird mystery.
Yep, one that has been covered up. And you know that you answered the question up there, but that was always my question. It's like, okay, if there's giants, if there's elongated skulls, which I'd love to believe too. Yeah. Why would they cover that up?
I think, there's a lot of reasons, but I think one of them is just because it stopped. Anything that's too unique is, for one, it sells, and then for two, it's like it gets in the way of you doing something. I'm going to build property here. Well, that's the place you found that elongated skull. Oh, no, you can't. Ask any of you out there know any miners, ask them what their standard operating procedure is if you find an arrowhead in the mine. Just ask them. They'll tell you right away. If you tell them, you'll lose your job.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So we have some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
From some people. Here, let's see if I can find them now. Hang in there, chat. We got you. Where's the first one? It said question there. Right there. Okay. This is from, is it Rubate? Robate.
I know Rubate.
Robate. What up? Shout out. It's like a live stream. It's awesome. Is there any implication that the malaria plague that wiped out 95% of the natives
I'll be all
was
right for power.
deliberately introduced.
No, there's not in that area that I'm aware of, but it would. Not in that area that I'm aware of, but it wouldn't at all be surprising because they were doing all kinds of shady stuff to the Indians up there.
Oh yeah, my conspiratorial mind says yes.
Yeah, almost
Says
certainly,
yes.
yeah.
Now he's got a heap of questions, and you know what? He didn't think we had time, but we've got time, buddy. Heap of questions, but only time for one. How reliable are the native lore stories? Were they recorded back in the day, or are they recent additions? Does stealing the mojo include wiping out the original holders?
That's some good questions there. Okay. The reliability of the accounts is interesting because most of them were taken in the 1800s, right? Some in the early 1900s. But if you befriend a Native American, they'll quickly tell you that they don't give, at least in that part of the country, they tend not to give all their creation myths away. They tend not to give all their myths away to white people anymore. They hide things. It's like they hide the skulls. They're tired of their shit getting looted.
Yep.
So they start sticking them into little corners, and they feed us BS. And so some of those are going to be bad, but that's where when you take 10 or 20 different accounts and you start seeing some things repeat, show up over and over and over again, well, then you end up with something that seems more robust because the odds of them all conspiring to make up that lie seems, the odds are against it.
The odds are against it. I always favor ego and hubris
Yes.
getting in the way of a lot of things. And, that's why a lot of Native Americans have claimed sites that aren't theirs, even though they know to protect them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a competition with other tribes sometimes even.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these guys were not buddy-buddy back in the day, and they're still not buddy-buddy today. That's not such a problem in the Pacific Northwest, but it is a problem in the country.
It is.
Yeah.
And then there's the universities who, the politically correct universities who are out there for the marginalized people, which is just bullshit.
Well, I'll say something right now.
Say it.
NAGPRA is a Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. It was passed in 1990. I was 15 years old when it was passed. Dartmouth University just 3 years ago was in trouble for still not being
Testing
in compliance
1 2.
with
Hello.
NAGPRA.
Yeah.
Dartmouth
Testing the microphone.
even had teachers using Native American bones that were supposed to be repatriated as teaching aids in class.
Testing.
Now,
hello.
This is a
hello.
school
hello.
that
hello.
Flint Dibble
You got
happened
it?
to teach for.
Good.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Yeah, through the internet, but he's still
Of course.
But
Well, it's not like he's going to leave his house.
John Hoops University, Kansas University, every year they've got Native Americans on their lawn protesting them still not having their stuff repatriated. So these guys, they might these, oh yeah, we're so sad that we took the land from the Indian. We were so terrible, and it's like you still got boxes full of the shit that you were direct, and you could draw a line of lineage straight back to the worst of the worst that ever did anything to these people besides maybe the soldiers that shot them. And then you're going to call us the bad guys because you said I'm sorry? This is like that BP shit from South Park. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. That's why we love Dan, by the way. There's more.
Nobody loves me like me.
There you go. I had a joke there, but this isn't my show, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there. Is the implication that they leveled Mount Coffin deliberately to find occult secrets?
Yes, something was up. The guys that were leveling it weren't. The Portrait Star and Sand Company wasn't connected to any like secret societies or anything I could find. They were just more into the money. But the locals in the region were like adamant that there was Indian treasure in that hill. So it makes sense that they would have kept chopping into it until they found something. Because again, the basalt thing is really weird. Basalt is all over that part of the country, so it's like it's not valuable at all.
No, let's see if I think that's it. I think we're good. Somebody said great job. Thanks.
Oh well, thank
to
you.
Dan.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Right on, buddy.
Thanks, Gary.
I'll see you at the panel later.
See you then, yes.
We're going to talk about Atlantis.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, it's your favorite subject.
I love it.
Yeah,
I do.
it's all real.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.